Doing good? Good morning. Fantastic. The opening panel, people really expect a lot. Right? Yeah, so maybe I would just like to ask the team to put Slido on. So we also have Slido for many sessions and discussions, so you can already start to vote. And in the meantime, maybe we can introduce ourselves just briefly. Ladies first, so Erica.
Good morning, everyone. I am Erica Taylor. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at Genentech. I've been there for about 15 years in a variety of roles. We talk about cross-functionality, so I've been in analytics, sales, and marketing.
Thank you, Erica. Matthias.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. I'm Matthias. I'm currently heading IT strategy and digital transformation with ViiV. So my background is science. I worked in hardcore pharma research as well as management consulting, and now moved on to IT.
And JB, I hope you don't mind that I say JB because
Please do not in my name. So I'm JB. I'm heading regions Europe and international at ViiV. So I'm been 25 years in logistics in those areas.
Thank you so much. Let's dig the conversation. In your bag, as already mentioned, you can see a very interesting question. Word cloud, in one word, what does being cross-functional in pharma mean for our customers? First question, cross-functionality, we all know, is maybe the biggest challenge nowadays for pharma, right? So how would a proper cross-functional culture actually look like in a pharma company, and how we can even measure it? Because I think we don't speak so often that we can actually measure cross-functionality. Who would like to go first?
So I think when you really see true cross-functionality, it's really hard to tell in any given conversation or any collaboration who the true lead is. Like the leadership should be fluid. Decision making should be fluid and context depending on what we're discussing. Something that's more relation to medical, they should be taking the lead, marketing, etc. Measuring it is really hard. I think the simplest measure is start to thinking about the patient outcomes that we're going for. So to me, the end measure, the sort of last measure is time to administration, time to first infusion, depending on how your medicines are administered. And in order to do that, all functions have to work well to get that to be as efficient as possible so patients are benefiting. But then you can walk back measurement in such a way that you're actually measuring what the employee experience is when you are acting cross-functionally. There you're getting into more qualitative measures, thinking about things like how people are spending their time, how are they feeling a measure of accountability for their outcomes for the patient, and that should be across the entire team. So we take a variety of measures, and it's still a work in progress, I would admit, for us.
It's a never-ending process, right?
Indeed.
Absolutely. Matthias, do you mind?
Yeah, I would subscribe to everything you just said. What we currently do at ViiV is we reorganize the entire company into a model which we call dynamic shared ownership, where we actually dissect reporting lines from tasks people are assigned to. So we aspire to create a setup in which resources flow into specific teams, self-organized teams, where organizational charts actually don't matter anymore.
Thank you.
Yeah, for me, cross-functionality is really the key to unlock impact at scale. And I look at it from 3 different angles, really. I mean, one, obviously, how you organize internally. And the measure of the impact is really how you're able to accelerate innovation. You create what you call cross-functionality, the creative operation that you need to actually bring the best ideas and diversity and bring innovation. How to improve efficiency within the organization by pooling resources, by avoiding duplication, by making speed of decisions and action much more improved. But more importantly, I think a well-functioning cross-functional team is one that really impacts customers much more by having an impact that accelerates the adoption curve for innovation, that sequences the different interaction and touch points. That's what we're trying to achieve. There's another angle which for me is very important about cross-functionality is how we interact with our ecosystem. So it's the co-creation not just internally, but with the stakeholders, whether they are associations, patient associations, communities, policymakers, clinicians, of course, to create the fertile ground for innovation to be rapidly accelerated. And finally, I think another, which we're going to talk a lot about, is cross-functionality, is the cross-functionality between humans and machines, and how we augment ourselves to augment our organizations to be faster in diagnosis, faster and more diverse in our design of solutions, but also being able to develop a boutique solution at scale. And I think that's really how you measure the success of cross-functionality to achieve all this.
Yeah, thank you so much, Abhi. Well, I remember, for instance, people who saw the agenda for next, they said it's super heavy on AI. I agree, but I think that's the present need for the upcoming years which follow. Right? But we intentionally big cross-functionality approach because I think you can't scale any kind of AI or any kind of digital, any kind of other technology initiatives without proper culture and cross-functionality. So let's see, in the meantime, our word cloud, and interesting, you can say nothing. Okay, that's interesting. Is that fair to say that basically in one word we can describe cross-functionality as nothing?
What it means for the customer.
Exactly.
Well, the customers don't really care how we organize ourselves. They just want a fantastic experience, how we engage with them. And actually, we tend to see this political engagement, the commercial engagement. We still are a business, we still are a company engaging with them. So the moment where they feel they have a seamless experience, no matter who interacts with them, we want. So I understand why it should be nothing from the eyes of the customers. They don't care how they organize the mission.
Exactly. Next one. Next question. Who really leads in a cross-functional environment and does it alright, my favorite one, between agenda, customer, and profit?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, I think who leads is context dependent. And that context, to your point, can be driven either by the agenda of the customer or what have you. It's my belief that if you're starting with the end in mind, the outcome you're trying to drive either with the customer innovation, and walking back from there, that should be where the leadership should sit. And that has to be modeled, I believe, at the highest levels of senior leadership. It's very easy to ask others on our teams to do that, but if you're not modeling it, they're not seeing their leaders model that, then I think it becomes even more difficult. The fact of the matter is, you talked about divorcing sort of the work from reporting lines. You know, we have a large marketing organization, and what I've seen in my experience is reporting lines are incredibly important because your manager is usually more determining your performance, your career development, your progression, and if you can't ignore those reporting lines. Like I think in an altruistic idea that we're all serving the customer, we're all serving a great outcome. You need leaders to model that, but you have to be able to incentivize for that. Otherwise, it falls apart because at the end of the day, you're really beholden to. Particularly when you're considering the various silos in our organization, you're beholden generally to that leadership structure.
Makes perfect sense. Matthias?
Difficult question, to be honest. I mean, my answer actually would be most likely all of them need to lead their specific piece of the cake. Right? So at the end, of course, we aspire to create impact for customers or patients, and anything else doesn't really matter. On the other side, I also fully subscribe to the statement that at the end, customers do not really care how we are organized. So we need to organize ourselves in the most efficient way to serve the purpose of delivering something meaningful to our customers. And this needs to be led by the organization, i.e. the management. On the other side, what we do is most likely primarily determined by what customers need.
Yeah, that's the key point.
Yeah, I think clarity of the mission and what you're trying to achieve is very important. But the optimal leader in the cross-functional team, I think, serving the shareholders, the patients, and the employees equally has to be a guide. Now, within the team, I think it will always depend on the kind of projects you're looking at. Is it a launch, a competitive launch, versus a technical launch? Is it fixing a development problem? Of course, the right leader will change. And I think we need to, as I was alluding to before, we need to be very careful about how managing the reward of the collective delivery, but not forget about the individual accountability, so that people don't blur, because they have to feel their own part of the collective delivery. And I think that balance is for me hard to understand.
That's a good point. I'm good to mention this. What about the culture of failure? Because I think that especially in Europe, we are somehow very resistant to that one.
Well, the theme of this year is, I think, psychological safety. And certainly in a world where it's very unpredictable, very complex to know how the solution is going to work. We all talk about AI, but we don't know what it really means or to grasp it. So it's about experimenting, failing, supporting teams to keep moving, and the tone from the top and the way the leaders approach this culture is so critical for succeeding as a cross-functional team.
Exactly. Anything to add on cultural failure? I mean, that's not such a popular topic in Europe, to be honest. So.
Did you say it's not a popular topic in Europe, or is?
It's not a popular topic because we don't like to fail, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think for us, building a culture where it's, evolve or die is sort of our idea around how we have to continue to change. What's been challenging about that is, and you mentioned it earlier, JB, that it can create instability for people if you're constantly changing. And so how do you create the idea that you must continue to change because our patients, our markets do, while providing at least some security for folks that there are just certain things that are never ever going to change, and walking that balance as leaders is really a challenge for us.
Definitely. Matthias, anything to add?
I guess it's important to create an atmosphere in which failures are a true learning opportunity. On the other side, we shouldn't ignore that we need to avoid mistakes. And I always try to distinguish between real mistakes, something you should have known better if you did your job in an appropriate way, versus failures where just the outcome was not the outcome you hoped for, but at the end it was worth trying and there was a realistic chance to succeed as well.
Definitely. You also mentioned a very good keyword, I'll say, which is accountability. So, yeah, totally agree with you. Next question. Leadership alignment, support and career development, super critical, we already touched the topic, but are those the secret ingredients for becoming cross-functional? What do you think?
Absolutely. I think you need the leadership commitment to at least articulate the why. I think many people will move in a direction so long as they're clear on why it needs to happen. And then you have to articulate from a leadership perspective what exactly is the how that we're going to get there. And even that, you have to have enough structure that people can see it, but you want to create enough fluidity and accountability that people can shape it as we're learning how we're going to get to this end state. So when we think about, for example, our buzzword, transforming marketing to be far more personalized and relevant and timely and really have better customer experiences, we can describe why that's important. People can get that. The question is, how do we actually get there? And it requires, myself, my peer leaders to actually continue to articulate that vision, to model it, and then to find ways to have others in the organization help shape it and how we get there.
Thank you.
No, I believe a lot. As a leader, the most important thing is design the organization for what you're trying to achieve, so that the people you appoint actually project the change you want to see in the organization. They are really authentic and credible when they are driving the organization in different directions. So for me, leadership appointment is so important. And then you can't have a culture which is a hero culture, where only one function or one person will win over the others. You have to have the feeling everybody has feel valued, has ownership in the delivery, and actually can progress their own agenda, still serving the purpose of the big team. So leadership appointment, the culture from the top, and ensuring people are actually invited to collaborate, we share the objective, shared goal, and very clear vision is critical.
Thank you, JB. Matthias?
I guess one additional important element is how do we draft career paths also for our future leaders. I'm strongly convinced that we need to focus a lot more on cross-functional career paths for the next generation of leaders, that they also understand what is actually needed in neighboring functions, how do interfaces look like, what kind of people are working in respective functions, and can also do a better job afterwards in order to assign the right people to the right tasks. They really understand what is actually needed to perform a specific job.
Definitely. What about leadership knowledge? Because I learned many times when we speak about AI, about, for instance, market knowledge, many leaders, even customer experience, very senior leaders don't understand the importance and even, let's say, the subject. What about that, and how can we replicate that to the people to execute?
I feel very scared about this, because sometimes I feel totally inadequate to lead in a field that I really don't master or understand. So try to use a lot of reverse mentoring in the organization. So certainly when it comes to AI, my consultants are probably 30 years old in the organization, and I really try to empower them to either give insight, ideas, or sometimes even to lead conversations. Because I feel sometimes very awkward, let's say. But I guess that's where you have to let go, really be a backseat leader, and appoint people around you that can be triggering these changes that you want to know as a system.
Thank you.
I think you need leaders to learn, and it should be really visible learning. And one of the things that I think is challenging is the more senior you become senior leaders, you're an expert in something, and it could be multiple somethings. And certainly, as senior leaders, people are looking up to you because you have the expertise. And yet, when you're introducing some of these new technologies, I think it's equally important for leaders to demonstrate what they're learning. And to do that, like learn out loud, essentially. So I've been really excited to see that, at least at Genentech, our most senior leaders, our CEO and her leadership team, have all embraced an AI learning journey and have been very vocal about it. So sharing what they've learned with the full organization, how they've immersed themselves. They've done it, and we're fortunate to be based in the area. Google is down the street, Apple is down the street, and so we're able to really immerse ourselves, even in our backyards, and really learn these new technologies. But it inspires me and inspires our organization to say, okay, if my CEO is still playing with AI, I should maybe spend some time doing that as well.
Exactly. Makes sense.
I guess it's more about curiosity than about knowledge. I guess we need leaders who are willing, accept the challenge to learn new things, but not to become an expert in respective areas, but just to be able to ask the right questions and to demonstrate that this is something pretty cool and it's worth trying. And I mean, just me as an example, I do not know anything about IT. Nothing more than the average person of my age knows as well. But I'm still leading a major piece of our organization because I guess I can connect the right dots, hopefully, and ask inspiring questions.
Exactly. To reflect on that, you mentioned a good point, which, for instance, such kind of leader was Steve Jobs. We all know that, right? I mean, he never ever wrote a single line of code, but he understands at first place the customer and of course the technology which he provided to the customers. And of course with the people, of course. Not always in a good way, but that's another story. Last question. Where to start when we speak about designing such environment and where this, let's say, cross-functionality is leading our customers and delivering, I would say, proper experience to our customers. So where would you start in your organization, or where have you started if you are already on that journey?
I think there's a lot of angles to take. I think one of them, as you mentioned it as well, is the people you have in the organization and what you're reporting. So that is to say, you need people that have experts, but I continually advise, and we see people continue to grow their careers, where they've done many different things across their careers. So some of the cross-functionality starts with just the individuals that you have and their ability to think beyond the individual silo that they're currently in. It's easier to do that if you have experiences in other realms. And then the second thing is creating an environment. I love what you said around curiosity, where you're setting up teams where you may have deep expertise across various functions, but you throw into that not this sort of I have the answer, but what do we need to learn together? How can we approach a problem in a very different way? And so how you set teams up and how you reward the curiosity, the better questions I get asked, versus the who has the answer, and really setting up the accountability problem.
Exactly.
I think we spoke about the culture is very important. What are the words that are important in your organization? Do you actually favor or inhibit collaboration? That's very important. Designing for success, designing for cross-functionality, really thinking about how people need each other to achieve goals is very important. And finally, for me, you get what you're measuring. So really pay attention to, as we said before, the balance between the collectives and the individuals, and making sure that it's actually amplifying the cross-functionality.
Thank you, Matthias.
Yeah, we are just in the middle of such a transformation. Where did we actually start? We started, say, multiple dimensions. We try to get rid of as many corporate regulations as possible, and more or less trash all of them. We started from scratch. We flattened our org chart substantially and took multiple layers out, and we rethought the entire logic of resource allocation, saying, well, it's more about expertise pools and fluid teams in which you plant those capacities and skills which you actually need for that specific task. And we reduce our planning horizon from typical 5+ years plans now to 90-day plans.
90-day plans. Yeah, we all know that Bar is doing a huge transformation process. So yeah, I think you're quite busy nowadays, right?
Yeah, and it feels totally different. That's a cool thing.
Is it more agile, or?
At least it's perceived to be a lot more agile, and I mean, let's also be honest, also creates a lot of challenges and I don't want to say chaos, but question marks. On the other side, I guess just disturbing the well-oiled machine helps to find new ways of doing things, and this is what we currently experience. I guess we have many interesting signs that we are substantially faster, and it's also more fun.
Thank you, Matthias. We are left for 1 or 2 questions, so anyone with a question in the audience? The first question is always the toughest one. I think we really heard some nice. I see, oh, you're watching the conference. Do you have a question? Okay, good. Please.
Here you go.
Hello, I'll go first. Right, I was just interested in the point you were talking about around people getting experience across different functions. One of the concerns I have is if you have too many people doing that, then you don't get enough depth and speciality in the function. So how would you suggest you address that balance between getting enough breadth of experience but also making sure there's enough depth?
Yeah, it's a constant struggle. I think there's a balance there to be had. Some of it is just as simple as just what is the amount of time that you need to really develop the expertise. And so one of the things that I advise folks, particularly when you're earlier in their careers, you have the time to spend in a particular role. And it's important to get, as we call, more reps at something. So sign up for the 1 or 2 cycles. You learn at your 3rd or 4th or 5th cycle or something, whatever length of time that takes. And so there's a little element of patience that's required to take the time to get enough depth to move on to another thing, to get enough depth there. You don't need depth everywhere, but you need it in a couple of places that allow you to ask better questions when you are moving across.
Yes, JJ.
I guess, very interesting strategic question. And I guess the ratio between experts and what I would call flexperts most likely differs by function. But you have functions where deep expertise is truly crucial to be successful, and you have others where it's more about having more holistic view on things. And that's statement 1. Statement 2 actually would be not everybody needs to become a future leader. They can become a future leader. And I guess we may need to distinguish between people who are more on a deep expert career path versus those who actually want to lead the organization going forward. I would see more the flexperts on the leadership side, the experts on the traditional expert-driven career path.
I think the other thing I would add is that most big pharma have similar trajectory for senior commercial leadership or senior medical leadership or senior whatever leadership that people have to follow, which is a bit strict and sometimes makes us very slow to adjust to trends that fast-moving the environment. So for me, it's also where are the right places to inject fresh blood from outside and buy the capabilities that are different to build internally, but also to have people teach us and coach us. So sometimes it frustrates the trajectory of leadership development, but it's necessary, I believe, to keep a very breathing organization.
Absolutely. Thank you. One more question, and the last one, please.
When done well, technology can help create connections where they didn't exist, but when done poorly, or at least based on legacy systems, it can really reinforce and harden silos. How do you think about the role of technology, especially coming to the AI age, as changing or improving cross-functional collaboration?
I guess if the organization is ready to use those tools and apply them in a smart way, it'll be a true game changer. And what we try to do right now in our IT operating model actually is to build as many cross-divisional platforms as possible, to create also cross-divisional data lakes, which we can apply for basically any topic wherever it actually pops up. And if we are ready to use AI technologies in such a setup, I guess it can truly help to break down the functional barriers.
Yeah, what you just mentioned is the data structure in the organization, how much transparency you have, how the systems talk with one another. It's going to force everybody to then become very cross-functional. Because the data we talk to each other.
Yeah, I think, all of that, I 100% agree. I think the other thing is it's not just about introducing technology. And we have found that, to your point, that you can throw in a technology into the organization and sometimes it's not used, sometimes it harms, sometimes it does actually help. You have to build the processes and the incentive structures around that. And so it's not enough to say, here's AI, everybody go use AI. I think the more that you add technology, you have to figure out what's coming out. Otherwise, you're just going to add more and more to people's place, and that just drives more siloed behavior. And so you have to really be thoughtful about what are the technologies for the workflows that people and the processes around it.
Thank you, Erica. Thank you, JV and Matthias. Great pleasure. And we are exactly on time.